Good evening, everyone. I am Akhil Rathi from Asit C. Mehta Investment Intermediates Limited. First of all, on behalf of Asit C. Mehta Investments, I welcome everyone for this web call on Introduction to ACMIL Portfolio Management Services. ACMIL PMS is based on scientific investment philosophy, which creates supernormal portfolio designed to survive and thrive in all kinds of uncertain conditions. We offer several strategies under PMS, which are based on scientific investment philosophy. Some of our strategies are ACE multi-cap, ACE large cap, ACE mid-cap, ACE income, and many other strategies. 3 of our offerings got ranked in recent article by Money Control. This month also, in June month, some of our strategies have delivered good return. Our flagship strategy had delivered a 16% month-on-month return versus benchmark return of around 8%. So for today's this webinar, we have Dr. Vikas Gupta. Scientific investment philosophy is developed by Dr. Vikas Gupta, and it's based on research and analysis of 100 plus years of investment management history. Today in this webinar, Dr. Gupta will introduce us to scientific investing. Dr. Gupta is a US and Indian equities investment veteran with multi-decadal investment and research expertise. Vikas is regularly quoted, interviewed, and invited to contribute in US and Indian publications such as Seeking Alpha, TheStreet.com, Mint, and Money Control, and ET. He is graduate from IIT Bombay and holds an MS and PhD from Columbia University, New York. He served as a scientist and professor at University of California and IIT Kharagpur. So I welcome the inventor of scientific investing, Dr. Gupta. Over to you, Mr. Gupta.
Thank you, Akhil, and welcome everyone. So we will quickly get into the presentation. Let me So as Akhil introduced, our ACMIL PMS, the ACM PMS, is based on what is called scientific investing, and the result of that is a supernormal portfolio for the client, right? So we will get into the philosophy, we'll understand the concepts behind scientific investing and how it creates a completely original portfolio. So that is another thing we would like to point out, that this is a very different portfolio from all your typical PMSs. Okay, so all the popular ones, the unpopular ones, all the names you would have heard of, the philosophy behind it as well as what we end up in the portfolio is very, very different. Now, how do you go about that? What is the concepts behind it? Let's understand. So this is a very important chart. In fact, I would say this slide and next couple of slides is something which you need to understand very, very clearly, because a lot of you probably show this to your clients and talking about how Sensex delivered 350 times in 40 years, Nifty delivered 10 times in 25 years. But what I would like to point out that you look at the center bottom and there is a no performance period of 9 years. So from 1992 to nearly 2000, 2001, there is practically no performance on Sensex for 9 years. And if you actually continue to 2002, you will see that even up to 2002, 2003, if you entered in 92, you are still got negative performance. So for more than 10 years, okay. Then there is a 3-year negative performance period we are showing from 2000 to 2003. Then there is a huge fall. If you go to 2008-9, the fall is 60% on Sensex itself, right? And mid and small caps fell as high as 70, 80 or 90%. So these are some of the things which you need to pay attention to and recognize. Similarly, you are all familiar with the recent fall in February, March of nearly 40%, right? So all of this is part of the game. This is what the risk is about. And while everyone would like to point out the 350 times in 40 years, and that's the truth, it's also important to know the kind of risks we are talking about. And most people say we can take the risks, but very few people can handle 3 years of negative performance or 10 years of negative performance and a 40% fall or a 60% fall. Then the stock's going to zero. So we are not talking of penny stocks, right? Penny stocks go to zero, everyone knows. These are well-known companies, right? Yes Bank, DHFL, Jet Airways, Unitech. So, and when we say going to zero, I mean, it's practically, going to zero. I'm not saying that was quoted at zero price. There's always some price getting quoted. But compared to where the people entered, majority of investors, when they entered, it's a negligible price. So you're going to lose all your money. So this is just an illustration. It's not about these companies. What the point is that even well-known companies, you could lose a very, very large amount of money. So the question we ask our partners as well as clients is, Sensex has gone up 350 times 40 years, Nifty has gone up 10 times in 25 years, reasonably good returns, definitely significantly better than fixed income. But markets can go down by 30, 40, 50, 70+%. Markets can remain down for more than 3 years, even 10 years. You can lose all your money in the markets. Stock price can go to zero, and no investor can consistently enter the market just before a rise and exit the market just before a fall. So let's look at the chart again. And what we are talking about is, most people will say, okay, I want the fund manager, or I exit exactly on Jan 2008, and then I entered on March 9, 2009, and then it went up somewhere, and then I exited at the next peak and entered at the next bottom. And there are some fund managers going around saying all this. Okay, so our point is, we don't believe that. We think only people who are doing hindsight analysis will say all these things. In our opinion, it cannot be done consistently. Sometimes by mistake or some things you can do it. Okay, so you cannot consistently do it. So given these circumstances, first of all, do you agree with this? Only people who agree with this, all the data we have put down and all the inferences we are making, they will follow scientific investing, or they will feel convergence with that. For others, it won't resonate, because if you are looking for a magician who somehow knows beforehand when the market is going to rise or fall, or you think there is an algorithm, or you think there is some technical analysis, be my guest. We don't believe in that at all. You can go and find out, whoever it is. We are very, very clear, based on more than 100+ years of investment management history, that there is no one who can figure this out. And the fact remains that all the billionaires who have become billionaires from investment, you will hardly find anyone who follows technical analysis. Okay, so this or astrology or something like that. So anyway, so if you agree, let's continue. Then these are the typical learnings from the giants. Many of you definitely know about Warren Buffett. Some of you would have heard about Benjamin Graham, his guru. Some others would also know about his other guru, Phil Fisher, his partner, Charlie Munger, and Peter Lynch, right? Multi-baggers fame. So these are the typical learnings which people have on the street, which is that Benjamin Graham said, buy low price to book or low price to earnings. Phil Fisher supposedly said, buy great growing companies and hold them forever. Buffett, of course, talks about moat companies as inevitables. Charlie Munger talks about a concentrated portfolio, just buy 3 stocks and that is sufficient. And Peter Lynch talks about 100 baggers, right? Take a stock and then it will multiply by 100 times eventually. So these are good learnings, but most people would agree, most of you would think, yes, this is how it is. And we also think it would be like this, but we would also like to point out many other things. So when you use low P, what about the debt? Okay, so there are flaws if you only know this much. So one or two of the flaws we are pointing out in each case. So buy and hold forever, is the great company going to be great in 20 years? Okay, so buying more companies, what about the price paid to buy? If you buy at a very high price, does it make sense? In a concentrated portfolio of 3 stocks and a single stock with 30-40% kind of a concentration, what if that stock goes to zero? And then this 100 bagger, the research shows that there are hardly 3 companies out of 2000. 3 companies. That too, when you buy them at a bottom of their price and hold them for 25 plus years, is when you get a 100 bagger. Okay, so it is not that straightforward what you have learned. From the same giants, what we learn for scientific investing is this. Okay. Now, where are we? Let's learn where are we. Okay. Last 1 year, so let me just share that with you. Last 1 year, all the indices are negative. Large, mid, small cap, everything is negative, double digits, right? So that you all are aware of. Last 2 years, again, it's significantly negative returns except for large cap, which is minus 4%. So most of you and most of your clients will say, I am holding for 2 years. What is this? But the fact is that the market is negative. And in fact, small caps and mid caps, you could say practically in bear market. So you'll say, fine, 3 years. Even on 3-year basis, small caps is clearly in bear market. Mid caps are still minus 10%, and BSE 100, the large caps, is just 6%. So I'm not talking of annual returns. This is the total return over that period, 6%. Okay, cumulative return over 3 years is just 6% for the large caps. And for everything else, it's negative. So a typical portfolio would be negative over last 3 years. Okay, so we have to keep these things in mind, that where are we? Okay, of course, it being like this, it probably indicates that it's a significantly undervalued situation, right? So it's a great opportunity probably to enter. One more indicator we'll look at, popularly known as Buffett indicator, which is the market cap to GDP. And that's at about 54%. So market cap is 54% of the GDP. And the last time it was similar was in 2009 bottom. Okay. So we are in a similar kind of valuation situation. And that you know what that means. That it is probably time to enter for most people who plan to enter and hold for the long term. I think this is as good a point to enter as any. Now, having understood where we are, let's go back to, so this slide you pay attention to. This slide you will not find anywhere else. Everyone will say that market gives you 15% over long term based on Sensex, or around 11-12% based on Nifty, etc. Now, where is that return coming from? Okay, so we have taken, we are explaining the fundamental basis from first principles of the economy, how returns are created. So inflation, long run inflation of India is 7%. So we're talking of long term. Right now, of course, for many years, we are on a lower inflation, and it is possible that we will continue on a lower inflation in future. But the long term historical inflation is 7%. So 7% plus real return, you want some real return on that. That's why the long-term bank deposit rates have been 8.5. And you can replace. So instead of 7, if you want to put 5, this will become 6.5 bank deposits, right? So you want some real return. So the cost of capital to the bank is about 8.5%. So if bank is giving 8.5 to the depositor, and it has its own fund management costs, right? All fund managers charge fees, just like mutual fund managers or PMS managers. You think bank doesn't charge fees and just gives you a fixed return. No, they're charging fees. The fees are actually much higher. So they're charging 4% typically, and then they have to lend it not less than 12.5. Okay, so that becomes their base lending rate. And when a corporate borrows at that rate of 12.5, it needs to earn something more, because if it earns only 12.5, it doesn't make sense. So corporate borrowing 12.5 has to earn 2.5 more and at least earn 15% return on equity. So on its own capital, the corporate has to earn more than 15%. And that is why your market return is in the range of 15%. Because the corporates are compounding capital at that rate. Okay, that is why. Not because historically Sensex has given 15, you will get 15. Because the companies are compounding on an average at 15, that is why Sensex gives you that return. Okay. So same way now you can do projected returns. If you think inflation is going to be lower, you can say maybe 5% or 4%. If you say 4%, then return on equity requirement goes down to 11%. And that becomes your future return. If you say bank costs are going to be, because of technology, fintech, etc., instead of 4%, it will be 2%, then your return on equity goes down that much further. And if it goes up other way, then that much extra return on equity you can expect. And similarly, if you enter at fair price, the market return should be in that range. Okay, so this is a fundamental first principles based approach of understanding where returns are coming from. You will not see this anywhere else. Now moving on to the other concept of how is money made in the market. Okay, so there is no magic to it. There is a simple, basic, fundamental ways of doing this, and that is what we are sharing. So let's assume that a company has a book value of 100 rupees and its return on equity is 15%. So 5 years later, the company's book value would be 200. We are assuming a non-dividend paying company. So whatever 15 rupees it is making profits, right? On 100 rupees, return on equity is 15%. So 15 rupees profits. By end of year, that is reinvested and company keeps growing. At the end of 5 years, company's book value is 200 rupees. Okay. Now, suppose you bought that company at a fair price to book of 3. Let's say fair price was 3. It's just an assumption for illustrating a concept here. So the share price of the company would be 300 today. 5 years from now, book value is 200. Assuming fair price to book remains at 3, price of company is 600, and you make 15% returns per annum. So your whatever you invested has doubled. So you can now see where your returns are coming from. In this example, if you enter at fair value, you exit at fair value, your return is coming from the fundamental earnings growth of the company, the ROE compounding, right? Return on equity and the compounding. That's where your money is getting made. So this is a fair concept. This most people understand. Now let us talk about discounted value. So instead of buying at the fair price to book of 3, let's say you bought it at fair price, a discounted price to book of 2. So instead of 300 rupees, you paid 200 today. 5 years from now, book value is still 200. So book value is 100 today. You paid 200 for it. 5 years from now, book value is 200, and it reaches the fair price to book of 3. So the price of company is 600. Now your investment return is 25%, and you have tripled your money compared to the previous example. You have tripled your money. So you got an economic return from the ROE compounding of 15%, and you got a 10% extra return on top of that, which we can call value return, because you bought at discount to fair value. Okay. So that is the extra alpha, you can say, you have generated over and above the fundamental returns. So this is the mystery. So many people will be talking about this return, which is based on ROE, the fundamental return or economic return, and they will say just buy good companies, high quality companies which have high return on capital, etc. Absolutely right. Very good. You should do that. But if you want higher returns, you also have to have the discipline of not paying the fair value, but entering below the fair value and selling at the fair value. Okay. Now we will get on to having put these basic concepts in place. It will be much easier for you to understand what we mean by scientific investing. Okay. So scientific investing focus is to create a supernormal portfolio designed to survive and thrive through uncertainties, because uncertainties are a given. Right now you'll appreciate it because of the last 3 months and COVID, etc. But you should remember all the time, the future is uncertain. It might look certain during some good economic periods, but all the time it is uncertain. So all the time you have to have a strategy which can survive first through uncertainties. And some uncertainties can be favorable, or every unfavorable uncertainty can have a favorable aspect to it. So your portfolio companies should be able to thrive in that as well, not only survive. And the focus is on return on safety. So keep that in mind. The idea of scientific investing is to deliver return on safety. This is very different from any other investment philosophy you would have heard of. Okay. So this is the core insight which differentiates us from everyone else, even in the fundamental analysis value investing school. Most market participants chase alpha. Everyone is trying to chase alpha. What manifests in the portfolio eventually is risks. While one could chase safety and get alpha. Okay, so if you chase safety, alpha is a byproduct. So this is our insight. You will see how that happens in the future slides. So scientific investing, naturally, we showed you some of the giants on whose shoulders we are standing, and why we have things which are suitable for current scenario. So this is scientific investing based on more than 100 years of investment research. Okay. And now you will see what we learn from Graham. For scientific investing, from Buffett, risk is defined as loss of capital. You don't want to lose capital. Okay. Charlie Munger, moat investing. Phil Fisher, growth investing. So yes, so keep these points in mind, moat and growth. John Burr Williams, discount to intrinsic value, most important point. First, you have to know how to do the intrinsic value. That is coming from John Burr Williams. And then you try to buy it at a discount to that. And then Peter Lynch, more than the 100 bagger or the multi-bagger, keep in mind the diversification. Peter Lynch had more than 1,400 stocks in his portfolio at a time. Okay. And many other practitioners. So all of that is put together, and this is the evolution of scientific investing. At the heart of it, what we are talking about is you don't want a portfolio which will get in trouble when there is a disruption, when there is an uncertainty. So first thing we try to get rid of is capital destroyers from the full market. Scientific investing takes out the capital destroyers. What are these companies? So these are companies which have weak balance sheets, weak business operations, right? So because of those things, they end up being capital destroyers. We showed you some of the stocks going to zero, but there are many stocks in the market which go to zero, and the common characteristics of all of them is capital destroyers. Next is capital eroders. So capital destroyer, again, let me clarify. We are not talking of stock price going to zero. We are talking of fundamentally the company's capital going to zero. They're destroying the shareholder capital itself, the capital inside the company, whether it is borrowed from banks or it is the shareholders' capital. They're destroying that capital. Okay. So because they're destroying, that's why share price goes to zero. Okay. Next, so you get rid of those companies from the market. Next is capital eroders. So capital eroders, we just established that in India, your return on equity should be something like 12 to 15%, depending on where inflation is at. Okay, so if return on equity has to be 15%, then companies earning, let's say 7% return on equity, they're eroding your capital. The company looks like a profitable company. It has its income statement is showing a profit every year. It is paying taxes to the government, but return on equity, the cost for holding equity capital, which it should be generating for the shareholders, it is not doing it. It's earning only 7, 8, 9%, which the shareholder could have put the money into the bank and gotten that kind of a return, right? So they're eroding your capital slowly. So get rid of those. Next is capital imploders. These companies are compounding capital well. The return on equity is probably good, but the problem is they're extremely overvalued. So just like I showed you that if you buy it below intrinsic value, you get excess returns over the holding period above the return on equity. Same way, if you pay too much, if you pay a premium, if you buy into an overvalued company and hold it, eventually you will lose capital. You will lose the return. You will get less than the return on equity. And if anything goes wrong, actually there is a sudden drop of the share price. So that is why we call it an imploder. What you're left with is capital multipliers. So from the capital multipliers, you create a portfolio of the best, the most supernormal companies which are at the highest discount to intrinsic value, that is supernormal prices. Okay, and it has to be with caps on stock allocation and sector allocation, etc. So this in a nutshell is what scientific investing is about. Let's learn a little bit more about it. So this is designed to survive through difficulties and also to thrive when favorable situations arise. So supernormal company, there are three sources of alpha. One is economic alpha. Company is able to survive because of strong balance sheet, and it thrives because it has a persistent advantage and a huge growth opportunity. Okay. Value alpha, we explained to you how value alpha works if you buy it cheaper. So survive is, now this is the investor survival, your buyer's conservative approach of not paying too much. And then you thrive because you have a true firm economics. You have an analytical toolkit which lets you explore the full firm economics. It's not about just reading the income statement and the declared earnings, right? That's not the true earnings. You have to be able to decipher the long-term true earnings of the company, and you need a superior valuation toolkit to generate value alpha. And then there is the governance. So the portfolio alpha, superior allocation framework. So we talked about having caps on sectors and having caps on how much you allocate to a single stock. And then how do you rotate the portfolio so that you can capitalize on future opportunities. So three sources of alpha. Okay, we'll just explain quickly the economic alpha. So if company with ROE of 20%, and let's say the average in the market, average companies ROE of 15%, your portfolio companies are 20%, you have an alpha of 5% automatically, right? The 5% economic alpha. Now you buy at 50% discount. If you buy at 50% discount and you sell at fair value, then you have a 15% extra value alpha, right? So you have 5% economic alpha, 15% value alpha, and so on. This is just an illustration. So this would be a supernormal company at a supernormal price. So I'm not saying that every time you will have an alpha, value alpha, or you will get of 15%. We're just giving an illustration. Okay, now since we have clarified these concepts, I will stop here and I'll request Ashwini to give an idea of how it has worked out in real life. So this is the concept, this is the philosophy, and now Ashwini will tell you how this works in reality. Okay, he'll just give you a flavor of that quickly. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Very good evening, everyone, and thanks, Vikas. So, uh, so I'm going to share, a recent performance update and how the different segments have been working for our multi-cap portfolio. So before we get into the more details, what is essentially important to understand that, as Vikas said, that this is a very completely unique portfolio, and many of you are advising clients on PMS investing. You are aware of what typical companies are popular across portfolios and what most of the managers are holding. So one thing is very sure that you would not find these names, these segments in those portfolios. So there is a very unique way or approach to arrive at this portfolio, and that's another reason that we decided to talk about these segments and give you more insights, so that you are also able to understand that why it makes sense what we are seeing, which the broader market participants are not seeing. And also in the process, the strength of the scientific investing process gets highlighted. So one clear message that came out is that you have to have a portfolio which is able to survive in any kind of an uncertain environment, because that is going to be there, no matter sometimes it is economic, this time it is health related, sometimes it is political. So there could be different reasons why there is uncertainty in financial markets or in economies, but we need to have first our foot firmly grounded on the, and then able to see that which are the companies who can now optimize and thrive in such uncertain times. So what you will realize, across these segments that I've, shown on the slide. So key segments, as you can see, is digital transformation is one key segment. Power, four companies from that. Defense is a key segment. Rail infra is a key segment. Housing, finance, basic material. These are some of the key segments. So there are around 7, 8 key segments that are there in the portfolio. Now, across these key segments, the common themes that you will realize is the strength of the balance sheet. So all these companies have very strong balance sheets. They are actually cash rich. Most of the times they are cash rich, and which also reflects in the in some of the fundamental ratios that I'm going to share in a bit. So that is gives you ability to survive no matter what kind of uncertain environment comes up. Second is, all of them have very strong operating businesses with very strong, margin profiles or profitability. They are near monopolies in most of the areas. Most of these companies are near monopolies. So they have a very, very strong, you can say, moat or operating, business that they dominate. And third is that they are very favorably positioned. Like, this is from a thrive perspective, but given how things are changing, uh, so broadly there are a few themes that are impacting Indian markets or Indian businesses. One is global digital transformation. So IT industry or IT sector companies are very, very favorably getting impacted with that. Uh, Again, the COVID crisis has just kind of uh, you know fastened that process of digital transformation or digitization of a lot of businesses. You know, uh, it has kind of whether it is work from home or whether it is living from home or e-commerce or cloud or all those digital aspects have kind of being fast forwarded. So that is going to benefit these companies. Then there is another theme of a reorientation of the global business supply chain. Again, Indian government also is very, very focused. They want to be self-reliant. They want to impose restrictions on a lot of goods and which are getting imported at this point in time. And many of these companies, whether they are from defense or they're from power or rail, are going to be strongly benefited because of that shift that is happening, and it is happening globally. So it's not just what we are trying to do, but globally also developed countries and other countries are trying to look for alternatives from while they are trying to move away from China or and other dynamics which are at play. So these are the things which are giving them a tailwind in terms of benefiting them. So already they are in a strong business. Already the operating measures are strong, but they still have tailwinds helping them to further, and they have demonstrated. These companies have demonstrated, uh, high or to mid double-digit sales growth over many years, historically, and so that's where the strength comes from. Now, just looking at the recent results, uh, we'll see that we have beaten market by a very a good margin, where Nifty is 8% and we have done 16 plus, and it's a very broad-based performance. So it's not that just one or two segments have worked. You will see that almost 80% of the portfolio. Okay, we can stay on the last slide only. Yeah. So almost 80% of the portfolio is beating market. Housing finance, couple of companies, they have averaged return around 38%. Defense is around 34%. Power sectors average around 31%. And these are like, these are not the typical names. Like for housing finance, I can bet you that these are not the two companies that are, that you are thinking about. These are something which are not popular, which not many people are talking about. But they are strong fundamentally, and they have a good. And that's another reason why we have seen this kind of a outperformance, is because Street had a very kind of a surprise element when the recent fundamentals of these companies came in. The annual earnings reports came out for these companies. So there was a big surprise element. Street was expecting a much lower numbers, and that's where we saw. But this has just started. That unlocking process has just started, because now analysts are forced to relook at these companies from a different angle. They have been consistent in delivering growth, and now the market has started recognizing that, and accordingly it is pricing it. So now the question is, where are we, like from a future point of view, how we are positioned. So next slide, I have put a fundamental and valuation metric for these companies, which is to show you that still these are significantly mispriced. Okay, so let's look at the fundamentals. Like you can look at ROE of around 13.3% versus 8.5 for the Nifty 500, like the broader market. Asset utilization is higher. Net debt to equity, which is the strength of the balance sheet which I was talking about. So 20% of equity is sitting as cash. So these are all cash-rich portfolio. So much stronger fundamentally, and still you are getting it so cheap. Like the broader market PE at 29, whereas the portfolio PE is still, after going up. I remember it was somewhere around 6.5 last month. Now it has come to 8 because of a lot of companies have gone up, and even on any other count, price to book also we are extremely cheap. Interestingly, dividend yield, you see, it's 6%, and these are. It's not that historically or last 12-month basis the dividend was there, but we are not sure whether it is going to come. Most of these companies are cash rich, and they still being in B2B segments, have clearly laid out in their earnings reports, and that they are seeing very minimal impact of the lockdown or the COVID impact on their businesses, and they expect to do pretty well. So we don't see the cash flows going away. So we don't expect maybe yes, because of certain kind of allocations, they might kind of reduce some dividend payout, but overall it is still, there is a huge margin that that's amazing. So we are still looking at this portfolio, which is very mispriced. As you see, these are very high quality companies, as clearly seen from the fundamentals, and yet they are they're delivered. So it's not that these are junk stocks, and that's why the valuations look so low. No, these are actually fundamentally strong companies. They have been delivering on fundamental counts. Market has started mispricing them after noticing, the kind of earnings beat they have reported, and that's where we are. That we're positioned for a next phase where a lot of this unlocking is going to happen, and that's where we were kind of advising even at the peak of the crisis. And I don't know if we are beyond that, but a lot of investors were coming back and asking that, is it a time to uh, uh, top up and do allocation, or is it something where when I should start investing in equities? If you ask them, yes, they would clearly say, as Vikas said, that okay, 2009 I would have been putting all my money into equities, but March, April, May, I want to wait it out and stuff. But we were very sure, not because it's a opportunistic of time and you can optimize. We were very sure of the fact that these are fundamentally strong companies, and we are getting them extremely cheap. So this is a time to allocate. Yes, you should stagger it, across a couple of months, to kind of optimize on your allocation. But that's about it. So this is a quick intro into or kind of exposure, a brief exposure to the portfolio segments of the multi-cap portfolio. And we continue to talk, like in our next series we will get into these segments in more detail, where we'll pick a few companies and show you as case studies that how the scientific investing works, and that will give you a more insight on these processes. But this is a rather quick one. So next section, I think Asit is Akhil is going to take you to the product offerings, that how can you go about and take exposure to these portfolios. So over to you, Akhil.
Thank you, Ashwini. And thank you, Dr. Gupta, for giving your views on scientific investing. And thank you, Ashwini, for giving your views on multi-cap portfolio. So as I told you in starting, that we have several PMS strategies. The two flagship strategies are our multi-cap, in which Ashwini told you about the stocks which outperformed in the June month, and overall the portfolio is outperformed by around up by around 16%. So we have ACE multi-cap, a supernormal portfolio of companies with supernormal profitability available at supernormal prices, selected from top 1,000 stocks. Then we have ACE regular income. It's a multi-asset portfolio of equity and fixed income that targets to generating inflation-protected income from investments, which pays up to 1% of the NAV per month. Then we have ACE large cap. Then we have ACE ultra large cap. Then we have ACE allocator. Then we have ACE mid cap. So we have from large cap to small cap, we have all the strategies in our PMS. So just wanted to give the snapshot of our flagship strategies, ACE multi-cap. So we select stocks from top 1,000 from the companies which are having market cap of 1,000 crores only, more than 1,000 crores. And the weightage of the stocks is around 3 to 5%. And Ashwini, I told you about the fundamental valuations, which is very important for the strategies. Then we have ACE regular income, which is a very good strategy, which pays out up to 1% of NAV on a monthly basis. So basically, this strategy targets inflation protected income from equity investments. So total we have 6 strategies from our ACMIL PMS. So just wanted to give a highlight of ACMIL PMS. Supernormal company, it's a supernormal price, scientific investing, enhanced safety, enhanced returns, investing in the stars of the futures, avoiding the herd portfolio, avoiding permanent loss, and avoiding overvalued stocks. So we outperformed in May month also. 3 of our PMS strategies were outperformed, 2 from the large cap space, 1 from the mid cap space, and which was highlighted by Money Control. And you can see the article. The data was taken by PMS AI Fund. So to become a partner or for more information, please contact Sandeep Shekhar on 989234 8052, or you can email us at tms@acm.co.in, and clients who are there in this call can contact their relationship officer for more information and for onboarding process. So now we can start the Q&A round. So if you have any question, you can use the chat option or you can raise your hand. We will take all your questions.
Yeah, happy to take any questions if
Yeah,
anyone
yeah,
has.
yeah. We are just taking the question. So we have first question from one of the participants, Dr. Vikas Gupta. How do you reduce risk in your portfolio?
Yes, so the whole scientific investing philosophy is about reducing risks, right? And we talked about the whole market we have classified into 4 blocks, which is the capital destroyers, capital eroders, capital multipliers, and capital imploders, right? So those are the 4 blocks. And if I just take out the capital destroyers themselves, and I explain that it is, the simple concept, if you want to understand what is the core at the heart of a destroyer, is typically a very weak business model, and so weak business operations combined with a weak balance sheet, right? So if I take these companies out, then your portfolio is already, the remaining market is already safer. So your investment universe itself has become much safer, right? So this is something you will see in our portfolio, that we never have such companies which turn out to have some kind of a problem later on, fundamentally. Okay, so I showed you the stocks going to zero. All of these had some fundamental issue cropping out, and they were very popular initially. So we usually don't have those kind of portfolios because of our focus on the balance sheet and the business model. So that is one step of getting a large amount of risk out of the portfolio. The second piece of removing risk or reducing risk is the getting rid of the capital eroders. Once you get capital eroders out, now the only risk you're left with is that you are paying too much. So if you overpay for good companies, and that is what you will start seeing. Last month we performed, as Akhil pointed out, we beat all the PMSs because majority of the PMSs, and that includes mutual fund managers as well, are chasing a handful of stocks which were extremely overvalued. And you saw the result of that. So that result has just started, and you will see more and more of the capital imploders imploding over a period of time. And by not having those in our portfolio, we are reducing risk. So these are the 3 steps, very core steps of reducing risk.
Okay, so we have a second question. What is your view about markets and how to allocate in cash in uncertain times?
So yes, exactly. So right now, as Ashwini also pointed out, we don't know the future. We never know what is going to happen. All the information we have right now seems to say that yes, economic activity is coming back to normal, but we have to keep in mind that COVID is nowhere stopping. Because of the opening up, the COVID numbers are going up, and there is no reason to believe that they will slow down quickly. So under that situation, it will again impact the economic activities. So, and the market sentiment as well. So it's not just about India, right? It's also about US opening up and the typical FI being from US. What is happening there is also going to impact the sentiments. So keep that in mind and be humble and say, I don't know. I don't know whether market will go up, will remain stable, or it could even go down, and which makes the correct approach of allocating cash is over next few months. So rather than jumping in lump sum, I would allocate uh, over at least next 3 months, maybe 5 to 6 months.
Okay. So we have a third question. So Dr. Gupta, in scientific investing, do you think that the growth stocks you will miss out?
No, we don't think we will miss out on growth stocks. It's just that it is the growth stocks which market has not recognized yet. In fact, let me point out all the popular so-called growth stocks, which you might be thinking. We have looked at a lot of them, and their growth rate has been 7%, 8%, sometimes 10 or 11%. Hardly one stock we found, which is of the popular group, is about 13 or 14%. So all of the growth stocks are growing at single digits, high single digits of 7, 8, 9, or double digit, very low double digit of 10 or 11 or 12. Okay. Our portfolio companies are mostly double digit growth rates. So it is not about missing growth stocks. It is about having unrecognized growth stocks in your portfolio and avoiding the popular growth stocks.
Okay. So we have last question. You talked about housing finance companies in your multi-cap portfolio. So do you think that housing finance companies will outperform in the near future also?
So again, we are not making a comment on general housing finance companies. In fact, as Ashwini pointed out, we have two housing finance companies, and they're definitely not the ones. When we say housing finance, the two names which will come to your mind, they're definitely not those names. Okay. So we are not talking about housing finance companies in general. We're talking about the companies we have, and the reason they are likely to continue performing. And I cannot guarantee you a month-on-month performance or anything like that. But why we think they will continue performing is because they're strong on a fundamental basis and extremely cheap. They are extremely undervalued. Market doesn't even know they exist in some cases, or somehow they are ignored companies. And that is exactly what a good investor has to find out, right? Discover stocks which are yet to be recognized by the street.
Okay, so we are closing the Q&A round. Thank you, Dr. Gupta. Thank you, Ashwini, for giving your views. And on behalf of Asit C. Mehta